This morning, the first session which we are starting with is largely around healthcare, and I have a great set of entrepreneurs and some investors sitting with me. A few startups, few unicorn founders, and few entrepreneurs who have been there in the business for last 2 decades. So before we delve into the Q&A mode, I'll just quick the mic to each one of them quickly to introduce themselves and talk about their journey in the healthcare space so far. So I'll first start with you, Dr. Chandrasekhar.
Hi, good morning. I'm Chandrasekhar Nair. Most people call me Chandy.
Can you bring the mic closer?
I have been on this journey for the last 25 years with Big Tech and Molbio. We are a point-of-care diagnostics company that focuses on the global south.
Hi everyone, my name is Anand. Somewhere the cow got added to the Sivaraman, but it's Anand Sivaraman. Run Remidio, which is a medical device startup in the ophthalmology space, but the difference is we look at the eye as a marker for systemic diseases like cardiovascular risk and chronic kidney diseases as well. So we are in the business of early detection of eye and systemic diseases using the eye as the window for ocular biomarkers.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Rahul Agarwal. I'm a partner at HealthQuad. HealthQuad is a health tech, or I should say digital tech AI healthcare focused fund. We've done 2 funds so far, now raising a 3rd fund, and invested with very, I would say, high potential and high performing companies such as ekincare. So proud to be invested with Kiran at ekincare. So that's what we do, and we're part of Quadria Capital Group, which is the largest healthcare investor across developing Asia.
Hey, morning everyone. My journey with healthcare started 10 years ago. This is Kiran, founder ekincare. Prior to that, I was in telecommunications, right? So for me, healthcare was starting from ground zero, understanding and getting a different perspective, which other than which didn't exist. And we started with basic question, why not, for a lot of healthcare problems, and that kept us going.
Hi, I'm Aridni, co-founder and CEO at ImmunitoAI. I've done my PhD in biological sciences and then went on to start this company 5 years ago. We've now successfully built an AI platform that can create novel antibodies for drug purposes. So we have about a wide variety of targets that's currently being tested in the lab for drug purposes in oncology, autoimmune, neurology, and cardiovascular diseases.
Morning everyone, this is Puneet. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Forbase Care. We are a precision oncology company which are delivering genomic related tests to emerging markets and other parts of the world, enabling with digital AI solutions for customers across the world.
Sure, thank you. So I'll first start with a common question for all of you. What other gaps are you identifying in patient care today that you think needs to be fulfilled, and how AI can further help you in taking care of that?
I think the biggest gap is that most of us are still treated presumptively. There is no diagnostic-led therapy, and unless that changes, there will be a lot of gap in our rate of recovery, and it will also impact society very significantly as it is doing today. I believe that we have to start from the primary care level. If you look at this table, and all of us, I think if we fall sick, we end up at a tertiary care facility, which is completely unacceptable in my view. Primary care needs to be strengthened. We need these diagnostics tools at primary care so that the data is generated. Once that data is generated, the second big gap needs to be addressed is that we don't have a family doctor concept anymore. Somebody who knows entire families the way only a family doctor can. And I think that is where AI will really play a role. I think a concept of a digital twin that is data-led can actually help us ensure that we can predict diseases and ensure that state of wellness rather than treating illness. I think these are the 2 gaps that I see, and these are the 2 areas that we are trying to work in as far as healthcare is concerned.
So just to add on to it, but how do you measure the percentage, in terms of the rise, how it has further helped? Is there any ROI which you further put into it?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
How do you measure it in percentage, how it has helped
If you look at something as simple as tuberculosis, which our platform is being used for, over the last few years since it has been introduced into national programs, we have already started seeing a decline in the rate of tuberculosis. And I don't know whether many of us know, tuberculosis still kills one person every minute in this country. It kills more people than COVID killed ever. But COVID got the attention that it deserved. Diseases like tuberculosis don't. So impact will be measured in terms of how do we prevent patient-to-patient transmission, and how do we ensure that patients are on the right therapy, thereby not spreading diseases. These matrices are already in place. However, not enough technology focus has been there on these diseases. Whether it is infectious, and I'm only talking about infectious, but metabolic diseases compound the effects of infectious diseases. It is one human body, and we have to look at it holistically.
Yeah.
And I think we are getting to that stage with a combination of devices and AI.
Sure. Others?
So while diagnostics agree, primary care agree, preventive agree, but the missing gap between all of this is the standardized data, right? So today, while we have more than 100,000 diagnostic centers, multiple hospitals, there is no standard data exchange like in the West. So everybody has data in their own silos, formats, right? Now, as a country, until all this data comes into a central repository, or until everybody starts following a standard format, right? AI is garbage in, garbage out, right? If you have garbage data, you get garbage recommendations, right? Now, if the data is not standardized, there's no point, and AI just sits on top of that, right? So the basic foundation, the biggest gap I see in the country right now is data standardization.
Okay. Anand?
So, building on a lot of what has been talked about, I think preventive healthcare, especially in places where there are no doctors, right? And I call it as AI for access. There's AI for access, there's AI for efficiency, and then there is AI for support to a clinician in order to be able to diagnose and manage better. So, AI for access is where you're able to detect disease early in places where there's no specialist. So, an example of that is we work very closely with the government of Kerala, where there are 275 public health centers that use our devices with AI, and 99% of those that we detect with retinal diseases did not know they have the disease, because these are silent killers of sight in a way, right? So you are able to detect them when there are no ophthalmologists locally available, and you're able to move them to care before they become blind. So you are impacting by preventing blindness. Another offshoot of it, taking what Kiran talked about and data, is we realize that you have to incentivize the system in order for a general physician or a family doctor to do this. So we used the Kerala data, got the epidemiology, then did what's called the health economic analysis, led to now under ABD and PMJ a reimbursement for glaucoma and diabetic retinopathy screening that is now available to every physician. You don't need to be an ophthalmologist. Yeah. So that's really where I think we are moving. AI is helping in creating access, but also generating data at scale to be able to take policy decisions on preventive healthcare. I think that's where one aspect is. AI for efficiency is what we are doing inside the clinic, which is a lot of what, let's say, our focus is on is how do you actually help a doctor that has multiple data sets that are available to be able to have the support needed to be able to make the right standardized decisions that sometimes cannot get made. So that's the two facets as we look at in terms of the role of AI in healthcare.
Yeah, I'd just like to add for the domain that I work in, which is biologics, and for diseases like cancer and autoimmune, where biologics today is completely out of reach for the general Indian. And most importantly, personalized medicine is something that we have to definitely go towards, where we're not just prescribing, let's say, a Keytruda for all cancer patients, and it's not going to result in the kind of outcome that we want. So places like Forbase Care, for example, does diagnostics to ensure that we are giving the right kind of medicine to the right patient population and not just giving generic medicines, burdening them with a lot of money, but also not getting the right outcome. So I think it has to be more patient-centric to say, what is the right diagnostic, what is the right therapy, and then what is the right outcome that we're looking at for that patient.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe I can just pick a cue from all of you guys. But as we all agree, I think the general sentiment is collaboration. Be it government, be it public healthcare ecosystem, be it people like us on this dais and everybody else here. I think collaboration is key. Second, I think identifying the right kind of treatment as early as possible is, I think, perennial. Take the simple example. We get common cold, take a crocin, for example. It's like the normal norm. That's what we have been taught and brought with. So no matter what happens, we just keep on taking it, whatever happens. And I think that's the change in mindset for the community and also for the providers to kind of think through. And I think that's where technologies, services, what all of us are bringing on the table will enable. What if we can bring a piece of solution / technology, all of us are doing, whether it is Forbase Care or any other company is doing. If we can tell a clinician to enable a decision making which can enable a patient much more earlier. So one is early diagnosis, and the second also is even if for unfortunate reasons it's not early diagnosis, but still give the right treatment. Today it's like, if I may use the word hit and run, let's try this, if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And it adds to the burden of cost economics. One treatment doesn't work, let's try the second one. I would say, I think collaboration is key. Partnering with ecosystems. We have partnered with a bunch of governments. We have partnered with government of Maharashtra. We have partnered with government of Andhra Pradesh to kind of bring in early diagnosis using genomics to give the right treatment. As you rightly said, if we can identify that, it would be a great enabler in general. I think that's the starting step.
Sure. So you all spoke about AI bringing a lot of efficiency and the kind of data we'll all put in, but I also want to understand, because healthcare, of course, comes at a high price. So has AI been able to bring down the cost for patient care? Yeah. Any of you?
So at a large health system level, I'll give an example of US where we're deployed and India where we're deployed. So the data, and this is published data, we published with the NHS on this. The cost of eye screening now in India has dropped by 85% as a result of not only AI, devices going to the last mile also. It's not about AI alone. I think it's AI plus devices. Cut to the case of US where we work with the payers, because there the payers are incentivized if you detect disease before the acute care costs come in. So there you're looking at much higher savings because the cost of acute care is very high there. So there it's almost 90 to 94%, right? So those are numbers that you can really look at. But again, what's important is we look at what's called population health. So population health, in a way, those who don't have a disease are in a way incenting the system to manage those that have disease, right? So that's really how this works. So it's not about detection alone. It's the entire consumer journey from detection to treatment to monitoring. So that's where the entire cost decrease we look at. So if you take screening by itself, yes, that helps. But what after screening? The worst is you screen and find you have a problem, but you don't have a way by which you take care of it. So the 85% and 92% is for the entire journey from detection to cure.
See, first let's define cost, right? Because cost could mean a lot of things. Is it only the operating cost of healthcare that I think Anand covered? But you have to also look at the overall systemic healthcare cost, which includes infrastructure as well, right? And I think where technology and artificial intelligence is playing a big role in healthcare is look at traditional healthcare, brick and mortar healthcare, right? It is relevant, it is real healthcare, but it has its constraints. It is capex intensive, it is time intensive, and it is resource intensive, right? You can't take it and you go beyond tier 2 cities, right? And we all have grown and operated in India. Healthcare access reduces significantly in terms of quantity, in terms of quality, in terms of the range of healthcare that is available beyond tier 1s, tier 2s, right? So you have to also look at the infrastructure cost. And I think that is where technology and artificial intelligence in healthcare is playing and can play an even bigger defining role. Because as Anand said, right, AI is for access. So technology and artificial intelligence can take healthcare to tier 3, tier 4, and many companies on this panel and otherwise are doing that great work. And then you also look at the operating cost, right? There are models built on technology, artificial intelligence, which are really, providing consultation for free and then monetizing on diagnostics or products and all, right? So there are various layers for it, but the simple answer is both on infrastructure costs, on operating costs. I think technology and artificial intelligence is playing and can play an even bigger role in reducing the costs of healthcare.
I'd just like to build on what was spoken about.
Sure.
If you look at this combination of device and AI, that is actually transforming the way in which we can go and identify and eliminate diseases today. Again, coming back to TB, we today have molecular tests that can diagnose TB on maybe the first week of infection, something that took years to detect earlier. But how are you going to ensure that every person in the country gets a molecular test? That's really expensive. So now you have battery operated X-rays that can go to the field. Radiology is all AI, so access has really increased. So now you can go screen an entire village at a fraction of the cost of what a molecular technique would have costed. But you are able to see that nobody is missed. Similarly, if you look at this combination of ultrasound and AI, if you think radiology is a difficult field, sonologists are impossible to find. And this combination is now completely transforming the way in which we can actually look at organ health and the overall health of the patient. Of course, in India, because of our PMJ, what is that act? PMDT act. We have difficulties with things like ultrasound, but that is a temporary difficulty. I'm sure it will change. Correct. But this combination of technology, that is hardware technology and AI, is something that has the potential to ensure that wellness is the theme and not not illness, not treatment of illness.
Okay, sure. Okay. Any of you wants to add anything? No, I think. Okay. Sure. So Rahul, I'll come to you. The kind of health tech startups you are investing in, are there any specific segments you think are still, have not been taken care of, and you still feel a lot of work needs to be done and technology can play a major role in that?
So I think you pick up any segment of healthcare, I think there's still a lot of work to be done, right? Yes, there are certain segments in which technology and artificial intelligence has already taken a lead, right? Which is, I think the way, if you look at roughly 10 years back, it started with e-consultations, e-diagnostics, e-pharmacies, so on and so forth. And then it started becoming much more interesting, much more deeper, then started getting into clinical facility workflows. Patient interaction was already, e-consultation, e-diagnostics, e-pharmacy, but then, workflows within healthcare settings. Then how do you help doctors, clinicians take clinical decisions with the help of technology and artificial intelligence? So I think we look at all the layers, whether patient interaction, whether healthcare operations, clinical outcomes, bringing in efficiencies within healthcare settings with the use of technology, and now supply chains as well, right? So I think technology and artificial intelligence has now penetrated everywhere, but still a lot of work needs to get done, especially on the two prongs, right? Which is, how do you take tech and AI deeper into healthcare operations, help doctors, nurses, paramedics do two things: improve clinical decision making and patient outcomes, because at some point of time that transition is already happening, and it will keep happening, that healthcare has to move from episode based pricing to outcome based pricing, right? So that transition, technology and artificial intelligence will keep driving. And second is, improve efficiencies, right? Because we are a supply constrained healthcare system. Demand is high, supply is limited, and that is where technology and artificial intelligence is and can play an even more defining role. How do you make daily operations within hospitals, lives for doctors, nurses, paramedics easy, less burdensome with the use of technology and artificial intelligence? A lot of companies are doing great work on that front. So both clinical outcomes, efficiencies, and this will then improve patient experience, healthcare outcomes, and also reduce systemic healthcare costs. So I think a lot of work still needs to be done on these.
Dr. Chandrasekhar, I would like to come to you again and understand, patient care, if it has to reach the last mile across India, we have a very large market, and you're serving the international markets as well. What more you think needs to be done to reach that?
See, this is a huge opportunity, and it is also something with a massive barrier to entry. Public health is still the largest consolidator of health, and essentially governments. Now, governments require a tremendous amount of evidence to ensure that, one, the technology does what it's supposed to do. Two, it is cost effective and there is an entire health economics aspect to it. Three, how does it feed into preventive care? That actually requires companies to invest years together, decades together, to actually break into public health. And regulation adds another layer of complexity. Every country has its own regulation. Every country, even if you have a WHO approval, will want to do a pilot in their own country before they adopt it. All of these are massive barriers to ensure that the right solutions are actually there in the hands of care providers. So it is not because of a dearth of solutions or dearth of technology. It is just this entire complexity of how do you scale that is possibly preventing us from leveraging some of the things that we have today even better. Some of us have started doing this in a more focused fashion. For example, Molbio has a program called EDGE that we work with entrepreneurs who have reached a TRL3 level and try to speak to them about our own experiences in transition to scale. Because we believe that innovation, unless it is nurtured, and there is no nurturing of innovation right now from any innovation ecosystem. Everybody is focused on the early stage. Nobody is focused on what you do with somebody who spent 5 years on this. And sometimes that product or that technology might have not yet reached a stage where it is monetizable, and therefore funding becomes an issue too. So I think all of us, it's the responsibility of all of us working in technology to see that these innovations actually reach the patient. And some of these innovations that I'm seeing are absolutely mind-blowing. And it is a sad state that it's taking so long. So we have to accelerate this journey of innovation to the last mile, and possibly that is a collective responsibility. I know I deviated from your question, but...
Okay, thanks. I also want to understand entrepreneurship, we all know, is a journey which needs a lot of perseverance. And in this stage, when investor money comes in, equity money comes in, how do you ensure that it is patient capital, you get the right partners in place, because it's going to be a long journey ahead. So how did you all select your investors, and what role did they play in your journey?
So we didn't get our first investment from an institutional investor for 20 years. And that's because in the early stages, nobody thought we could do what we said we would do. Later stages, we had already spent too much time on it without creating a product, and nobody knew whether we'll ever scale. So it's only at the cusp of scale that we got a private institutional investor. Till then, we had investors who were largely HNIs and friends and family. But it is this gap that is there. How do you kind of reach the cusp of scale? That makes it investable, or at least show a clear path to scale. Yeah. That is a difficulty that every entrepreneur possibly has to live through, especially working in healthcare.
Okay.
So when you talk about healthcare investors, right? So healthcare is extremely complex, and if you look at in a country like India, it takes a lot of time because you have to build trust. You need to collect the data. You need to scale, right? And you need to build your algorithms. So to your point, absolutely, it requires a lot of patient capital, right? And for us, we were lucky enough. One of my investors is sitting right here, right? HealthQuad, which has invested in us, and even today, I mean, a lot of decisions are not taken from a short-term perspective. When we talk at the board level, it's more mid and long-term because healthcare investment, like I said, requires a different mindset, right? The metrics are different, right? How you measure scale, metrics are different, and you can't apply e-commerce or any of those metrics when you look at a healthcare startup or a healthcare company, right? And there's just a handful of such investors in the country who focus only on healthcare, and HealthQuad is one of them.
Yeah, I'll just add that we've been actively raising for the last 5 years, and what we've realized is that there aren't enough funds, institutional funds in India, which they may still have the intent to fund deep tech, biotech companies like us, but they don't have the domain expertise to actually build those conviction. And so to answer your question, it's many times not our choice, right? And many times it's their choice. And the ones who actually do invest understand that this is a space which requires, there are long gestational periods, and they come in with that mindset that, okay, I am coming in with patient capital. So it's the ones who don't have patient capital most often don't even end up, taking us to the second or the third round of evaluation.
Okay, Anand.
I think, one of the things that we realized early is healthcare as an industry is where product innovation is not enough. You need product, delivery, and business model innovation. All three need to happen. Yeah. So you need to get in different types of investors at different points of the journey. So very early, and I think I speak even with Molbio as well, we got Welcome Trust grant-based funding, right, which was grants to build. Both of us started companies in this space at a time when you wouldn't have investment capital at that point in time because we were too risky at that point. Product innovations were very risky. So therefore it was grant-based, then HNIs, then institutional, right? But many of us, I think, have also gone into strategic capital. The reason we go into strategic capital is because you want smart money that is beyond the money. Yes. So for us, it gives us distribution mode along with the capital. So I think healthcare as an industry and startups in this space, therefore, may have to look at the right kind of investor depending on the stage at which they are, and each business is different and it's an evolving space. It's not, I think Rahul may agree that there are not too many investors, so frameworks are not in place as yet, right? Otherwise, if frameworks are well in place, there'll be a lot of investors that look at those frameworks and say it's all. Right now it's an evolving space, especially on the delivery and business model innovation, the monetization side of it. We got into AI in 2018-19, right? But monetizing AI requires very different type of capital and very different type of activities to be done than developing AI, right? So that's why I think it's an evolving space. That way, when it comes to both the investor community and the entrepreneur community has to be very clear on who they want when.
If I can add the investor's perspective here, right?
Absolutely.
So completely agree with all the points that have been said, right? See, healthcare is a much more technical space, right, compared to consumer or even financial services for that matter, right? So completely agree that the investor ecosystem also is evolving around understanding these very new age. See, because it's easy to, I would say, relatively easy to understand hospitals, single specialty, even pharma manufacturing, right, APIs or formulations manufacturing, right? There's a lot of knowledge pool which already exists around it, learning curve which exists around it. But when you go to new age healthcare, technology, AI, and now you're talking about precision diagnostics, precision medicine, right? It's not very easy and straightforward to understand it. So investors, there are now many investors who are developing capabilities for it. if I just take our example, HealthQuad as part of Quadria Group, right? We realized this earlier. The founders are from healthcare, so they have that basic understanding of healthcare and healthcare science to start with. But then how do you build that ecosystem which smart founders, smart companies would want? Do you have clinical advisors into your teams? Do you have people who have run healthcare companies, pharma companies, diagnostic companies in your teams, senior people who can then add to the business plans of companies, give them distribution access, as Anand was saying. So we built a regional network, develop across developing Asia, and we try to do all of that, right? But healthcare is both technical in terms of clinical and regulatory. It's the complexity curve is a little bit more compared to other industries. So yes, founders also then, smart founders, smart companies, they also evaluate what type of investors we want to work with, because you don't want to get stuck with investors who don't understand your business and your goals. And healthcare takes time, so a little bit of patient capital. Yeah.
Sure. So Puneet, you would like to add?
No, I think very pertinently put. Having investors who understand the space, I think, is very critical. Having the right partner, both sides. The investor investing in the company and the company looking for the investor. As she rightly said, for example, healthcare is a long shot. It's not a e-com where the standard matrices would work. So if you typically go to an investor, they will say, okay, what's the plan? Run over run, ARR. Healthcare doesn't operate like that. So I think finding the right investor who understands the sentiment, philosophy, and the commitment of the founders and the company, I think, is most important for both parties. I think it's just not about the money, to be very honest. It's about getting somebody who understands the long game in terms of the outcome which will come through. I think the challenge for investors, and I'm sure you must have seen this enough, would be how do we equate it in the short term and the long term? Because it might be like the biasing voltage, right? 0.7 you have to cross for the diode to go through. But till 0.7 there is nothing which happens. And I think that's where perseverance and patience for both of the team members, investor and the company, I think, is really tested. And I'm sure we're all tested. We've all gone through this. It really tests us hard. And also the investor. So I would say, I think finding the right partner is very, very critical.
Well, I think the good news, so I just one point, Mr. Chandrasekhar. So good news that at least in India now, the healthcare investing ecosystem is also across all stages, right? So you'll find specialist healthcare investors in earlier stages before Series A, right? That is when company enters the early growth stage. Yeah. So you have early venture, late venture, early growth, late growth, buyouts, right? So in all these stages of evolution of a company, I think now there is a reasonable investor pool. Mm-hmm. So again, smart companies, smart founders should plan that way, is that, hey, I reach out to the right investors in the venture stage, early growth stage, and the late growth stage. And that solves for, because see, funds have a constraint. Funds, the way they are designed, they are not infinite or really long-term pools of capital, right? And the investors behind are very impatient. So the best is that you get these funds at the right stages and then get the next stage of investor to sort of change the baton at the right time. Easier said than done, but I think there are options.
Sure. Chandrasekhar, you had a point to add.
Last point, I think we are seeing, for example, our first private equity investor was Motilal Oswal. This was possibly their first investment in a company of our category, both in terms of where we were with our finances as well as where we were with our journey. But we learned tremendously with them, and they worked so closely with us through that journey that now today they are investing in other medtech companies. And this is great news for this ecosystem, that you are seeing this entire chain of funding available. Government of India is putting a lot of money into innovation. Now with ANRF and other such agencies coming up, The transition to scale bit is finally being addressed. And then you have private equity that is also having a sense of how this will play out in a country like India. It's a very complex country. The healthcare needs are also fairly complex. So it is nice to see that that chain is getting built. So I'm very optimistic for the future of medtech companies and funding in that area.
Sure. So before I open the floor for questions, audience, please keep your questions ready. I'll just have one last question for our panelists. We have a lot of founders sitting in the audience and who are further planning to build a health tech startup. So what opportunities or probably what breakthroughs you think are still, lying there in the healthcare space wherein they can further bet on it for the next 5-10 years?
I have been speaking to a lot of healthcare founders, startups, and I have only one request to all of us. Please don't go for the lowest hanging fruit. Please don't try to pivot at the first sign of difficulty. This is a patient game. If it is a patient game for investors, it's a significantly patient game for the entrepreneurs. And I think we have to build something transformative. If it is not transformative, it is not worth building. Just another replica of another product is simply not worth even pursuing as an entrepreneur. So I think we have to up our stakes. We have to up the demands that we make on ourselves in terms of what we do and build transformative products.
Anand?
So to add some of where I think there are significant opportunities is the entire care continuum from preventive health to curative and everything that happens in between. I think there are many points of value capture that are there. The key is it's a long staying game. It's not something that you may be able to think of quick exits. If your intent is to build something for a quick exit, this may not be the ideal space to spend time in. But I think there's a lot of innovation and on both medtech as well as health tech and medical devices and curative side as well. When it comes to looking at efficiency, when it comes to looking at building scale, but as Chandy said, by doing something novel, right? The reason why we scaled in the US is not because we made a low-cost product. We made a product that did not exist. I think we need to move away as an ecosystem from, even as doctors may say, can you make a low-cost version of this on the devices side or on the curative side or treatment side? I think moving to the next generation of asking, if I'm from Mars and I didn't know how we would do things, how would we do things? That I think is the right time for India right now to do that, and numerous opportunities there to reimagine. In fact, what I look for is if some of the e-com success stories come into healthcare, and I really want that to happen because they think scale very differently. That will reimagine how we think of healthcare delivery in India, in my opinion at least.
Yeah, so for the pharma space, I think we've mastered manufacturing. We are the largest manufacturer of generics, and I think we need to now move into innovation. And I think in India, probably we are the only AI drug discovery company in the biologic space, but we need a lot more. We need people building best-in-class, first-in-class drugs, not just, as you rightly pointed out, just making another generic version of what's already invented. And more India-centric problems. The West probably doesn't even know half the problems that we have. So we have to solve for the problem in a more innovative fashion. And I think IP is eventually going to drive a country's economy. So we can do services and manufacturing as much as we want. But if you want to get to the scale of where China and USA are today, we have to invest in innovation. So yeah, don't be afraid to take those, challenging big leaps and just go for it and try and build the most innovative drug for that matter in India. Yeah.
If you look at healthcare, right, again, the framework is 3 A's: access, affordability, and accuracy, right? Everything that we are talking about falls into one of these 3 pillars, right? As a country, we need to improve on all the 3, right? Access, everybody knows the doctor to patient ratio is ridiculously bad, right? And access in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 is bad, right? So how do you improve that? diagnostics, right? Point of care devices which can be mobile, right? Going to, right? That all falls in access, right? Now, affordability, again, there's no standard pricing transparency when it comes to India, right? You can go to a hospital, I don't want to name, but the same test could cost 25,000. If you go to a diagnostic lab, it could cost you 4,000, right? The same procedure is different pricing across the entire country, right? Now, how do you bring affordability in healthcare, right, across the country? Accuracy, right? Now we're talking about data, right? How can you standardize that data? How can you improve the prediction, personalization, and the precision, right? When you are looking at medicine, right? That comes down to accuracy. I mean, if you work on any of these, if you take one of these pillars, it's an ocean in itself, right? And that's where I would say if somebody is looking at healthcare, these are the three channels to look at.
Okay, Puneet.
I think pertinently put, I think innovation is key. You know, we need to innovate as a country, as a community on all aspects. But I think challenges of access, affordability come as part of that journey of innovation. You know, I'll give an example of what we are doing at 4-Base Care. Today we have built technologies by which we today can reasonably predict if a patient is going through a journey, we can generate his or her digital twins and say, you know what, there are these 20,000 patients, they were treated like that, and why does a clinician not look at those lines of treatments? You know, A drug working for a A patient, maybe a B drug working for a C patient. But I am patient 1, for example, and then I have the tool, access, and the technology by which a clinician can make a decision. I think we spoke about decision making, you know, clinical decision support. I think that's where the kind of innovation, it took us years for us to do that, you know, bunch of years. But today I think oncologists in India have that tool. And in fact, we must also say that even the Western worlds don't have technologies like that, okay? And look at the kind of enablement the government is doing, you know, the kind of access on infrastructure, you know, be it GPO access, be it cloud access, okay? Things like that require really, really deep tech plus dollar plus compute plus people. I think where India will kind of go through as a transformative journey is because we've already, I would say, killed the game in IT, but now AI coming in, we have the technology, we have the people, and now we also have the resources. What we will build, I think, is going to be used by the world for sure. And I think innovation is key for it.
Okay. Sure. Any last point you would like to add?
Yeah, so see, in
take the audience
healthcare,
questions?
yeah, so just resonating, healthcare, I think there is opportunity everywhere, right? India is a very unique country where we are still solving for the most basic healthcare problems and also innovating at the now highest end of the innovation curve in healthcare, right? So there will be opportunities everywhere. In our funds, we have invested in companies like ekincare, solving for a very simple thing, right? Corporate health benefits, right? There's no rocket science in it, but it needs to be done well. It needs to be done at scale. It needs to be done consistently with great customer experience and at scale, right? We've done companies which are doing very simple tech-led distribution of pharma, of medical devices, consumables, and 2 companies, GoAptiv, Medica Bazaar, they've built 2,000 crore annual distribution revenue businesses which are profitable. This is just tech-led distribution at a scale, consistent, very high consistent delivery of good quality services. Again, right, it's not path-breaking innovation, but where technology is disrupting the way things were being done in the past at a scale in tier 3, tier 4s. And then we have Cured, Visa, which are AI radiology, AI mental health, which have got US FDA validation and now being used in US by NHS UK, which is one of the best healthcare systems globally, right? So what I'm trying to say is that there is opportunity at all spectrums in healthcare. As Kiran said, right, it's vast opportunity. You pick up any prong, any leg of healthcare. It's just how do you build it, right? You have to solve a problem which needs to be solved at a scale. That's how you'll find scale. You have to be at the right side of clinical and regulatory. I think that's the most paramount in healthcare. And then healthcare needs ethics, right? So you have to do it very, very ethically. I think then there's vast opportunity everywhere.
Sure. With this, the floor is open for questions. Please raise your hand. Can you pass on the mic?
Yes,
to the
we shall
gentleman
pass
over
on the mic. We'll only be able to take one question for this panel.
there? Okay, 2 questions, and then we'll close the panel.
Thank you so much for the insightful session. And I think we, in the last 1 hour, we covered a lot of grounds in terms of health and tech and AI. But I think one missing piece is probably incentives, and I want to touch upon that. So largely speaking, there are 3 parties to a healthcare transaction when it comes to hospital and patients. So one is the patient, the other is the hospital, and the third one is the insurance. So, and unfortunately, incentives of all these 3 parties are not well aligned. But now, with AI, with so much of data, and with so much of probably collaboration because of data and AI, do we see some sort of a solution where we are managing to align the incentives of all the 3 parties, and that can, I think Mr. Rahul was talking about scale. I think we can achieve breakthrough innovation and at scale, because, and it would be a sustainable thing as well. So what is your thought on that in general? Thank you.
So absolutely right. I mean, if you look at it, there's payer, provider, and the end user, right? And you're absolutely right. Incentives are conflicting, right? So we recently acquired a company which is into AI claims adjudication, right? Now, the use case there is, today the friction happens when end user raises a claim, right? Goes to an insurance company then doubts hospital procedure, whether they've done the right thing or not, right? All this takes a lot of back and forth, manual intervention, phone calls, customer experience, and all of that, right? With AI, what we are able to do is, when end user uploads almost 60, 70 pages of their claims, right? We are able to give the user in less than 5 minutes what will be paid, what will not be paid, why will it not be paid, what procedures as per their benefit policy or insurance policy is not allowed in this, got done, right? What are the consumables? So that reduces the frictions, and even the hospitals are starting to realize how much will they be paid, and when will they, and what will not be paid, right? So when the data is there, when the transparency of that data is there, right, across the end user, the hospital, and the insurer, right, then you start building trust, right, between the 3 of them, right? And that's where AI, we're leveraging AI to read better and build that trust faster.
So, to give a credible example, and I'll keep it short in the interest of time, aligning incentives, for example, in ophthalmology, we realize that 80% of the revenue of an ophthalmologist comes from surgery. 70% of their time is in the outpatient department, right? So what we were able to create as incentives is, how do I increase the volume of patients that need treatment, but reduce the time that they are spending on the OPD? So combination of AI and devices help do that. That aligned incentives in a out-of-pocket system like India, where insurance doesn't pay for OPD, right? Cut to when we did it in public health. That's why we had to do the health economic analysis and get the government to reimburse under ABD and PMJ any general physician. You had to create that incentive. Why will a general physician do a test if tomorrow he is not assured of a certain minimum revenue? Raising the awareness of doing the test is one thing, but patient centricity is one part of it. The incentive has to be created in the system. So that's what we did with the ABD and PMJ to create that. Cut into inside in the US, and the reason why I'm giving this as an example is very geography specific. In the US, we had to work backwards. A Kaiser Permanente is very different from a Humana, is very different from everyone else, right? So there it was about the overall health system cost, which included treatment as well. So the incentive alignment, we got it wrong as well, where we promoted a solution in the US, the primary care never took it because they didn't make much money out of it. So we have to align the provider and the payer there. In India, it's more moldable because of the fact that insurance driven is not high on the preventive care space. On the curative side, a lot of what Kiran talked about, there's a huge opportunity in creating those incentives and aligning those incentives. And you don't have, one is creating, the second is aligning. The aligning part is, in my opinion, possible with tech at scale.
Okay, one quick last question and then we'll call it a wrap. The gentleman here.
Hello, my name is Vijay Lakshmi. I'm a startup mentor. So I keep attending a lot of events like this and interacted with many of the startup healthcare founders. So one thing what I found is they will not have the domain expert as a founder or co-founder on a permanent basis. So when most of them founders or co-founders, always they are from the technical background or technology background. When I ask them how you fill this gap, no, whenever it is required, like my friend is there who is working in healthcare, like my relative is there, cousin is there, we take their suggestions or whenever required we engage them. But how important it is to have a founder or a co-founder or a permanent domain expert when they want to build these kind of ventures or the products or the solutions. What is your thought about that? Thank you.
Very important. I can tell you in numbers, 2010 we were founded, 2017 we brought in a chief medical officer. Business-wise, we grew 6x after that. Extremely important. Earlier we would work with the clinicians by going out as a technologist. It's important to have a chief medical officer as early as possible because they help you define the right problem that you're going after. It's not in the solution, it's in the way you define the problem.
Yeah, but should that person be a founder? I think founders require different skills. This is more to align the founders to the problems that they solve. So that may or may not be a necessary condition for them to be a founder.
So again, classic management answer, it depends. It depends on the kind of startup that you're building, right? If you're into genomics, biotechnology, of course, I mean, you need deep expertise, right? If you're doing something more on the distribution, if you're doing something more on access, right, you don't need it, right? I'm a classic example, not from healthcare background, right? And it is a blessing as well in healthcare because today, if you talk to anybody in healthcare, they have a preconceived notion that this is how it gets done, right? Now, somebody outside in would always look at the problem differently, right? They start with the question, why not, right? And that's how we started, right? So it depends on the problem statement that you're trying to solve.
Thank you. With this, we conclude the session. I request our audience to ask the rest of the questions with our speakers outside the hall post this session. And thank you so much for being such a patient audience.